Hello and welcome to the DTC Podcast. I'm Eric Dick. Today we're catching up with DTC C-Suite Mastermind alumni and now former CMO of Greater Than, Bryan Alston, who helped scale Greater Than from a relatively unknown electrolyte beverage to an 8-figure success and staple of the new mother community. All of this with packaging that until now had been geared directly towards athletes. This podcast catches us up on Bryan's journey, including his move to become a CEO at a new stealth startup. You'll hear all about the rebrand, including some screen shares of the change. You can see YouTube for those. You'll learn how Bryan used AI to lower creative costs during this rebrand by about 40%. And you'll also hear how Bryan suggests we use data analysis to uncover game-changing patterns that might not look like they make any sense at all at first glance. And of course, we had to ask him whether or not he thinks that iOS 14.5 was still a good thing. That was the hot take of the year when he said that before. Always fun to chat with Bryan. On with the show.
Just like we saw with drop shipping 5 years ago, I think there's going to be this massive influx of AI brands that just use Midjourney for all their content, the exact same ad funnels and all of that. And it's just not only going to lead to this massive crowding and fatigue on our news feeds, but it's also just going to lead to a lot of customers being like, I don't want that. We're going into an era where brand and quality and the human touch is going to have a massive premium. Sure, like having like your own AI avatar sounds cool, but I don't think that e-commerce in the next era is going to really work that way. There is going to be a massive premium placed on true quality, understanding your customer base, understanding your value props, how to communicate them, the creative expression, etc.
Bryan, welcome to the DTC Podcast. The man who famously said that iOS 14 was a good thing, CMO of Greater Than. How's it going, man? It's been a minute, but been about 6 months.
It has been. First of all, thank you for having me back on the podcast. It was a great conversation that we had last fall, and it feels like the whole world has changed in our industry since October, in some great ways and in some more challenging ways. But overall, like things are going great on my end.
That's awesome. Well, so I know, we talked about the meteoric rise of Greater Than, specifically focused on women and finding that amazing product market fit with lactating mothers who had, were drinking sports drinks before. I think you opened up a lot of our eyes to how you think about product market fit, how you can find these super, super valuable niches. And this was, you were experiencing all this growth while you had this brand that really didn't speak to your audience that well. And it was a really great testament to the product market fit over branding, but you've now rebranded. Let's talk about the rebranding and how that's gone.
Sure. So if you go to the website, drinkgt.com, you'll see that for the first time, we actually look like a drink for moms. Like as you mentioned, most of this journey, we still look like a sports drink, and the website was still sort of slowly CRO'd to death to perform well. But we spent almost a year to the day, like really going deep, not only into our customer base, but also studying the needs of non-customers who are pregnant, who are nursing, who are even post-nursing, who are trying to get healthy drinks for their families, to really, really figure out how to build and shape this category that really didn't exist before Greater Than tapped into it. And if you go on the website, you'll see that not only do we have new packaging, which looks incredible, but in my opinion, I think it definitely speaks to moms a lot more. It was sort of engineered to stand out well on the shelf and really capture the energy and the excitement of motherhood, versus being this sort of soft pastel pink. But the website has definitely incorporated a lot of the best practices that we tested with the old site, but just like gave it a more elevated and polished look. And in the 6 weeks since it's gone live, the customer feedback to the rebrand has been quite strong, both to the packaging as well as to the new website.
Can we drill in on any of those, like the learnings that you have that you put together in building this landing page that I'm scrolling through now? drinkgt.com if you're following along with us.
Yeah, totally. So on the old website, which you can probably see on like Wayback Machine, it was very rough, to be honest. It was like all CRO. It was like, okay, this copy just works. We're getting the clicks we need. etc. But like what we like really like set out to do here is sort of still keep a lot of those things in mind, but be a little bit more brand heavy. And I was definitely one of those performance marketers that was guilty of thinking like, oh, branding is BS, who cares about it? But as you can see on the screen that you have now, like just like leading with the brand statement, which is self-care with every sip. Before, the copy that we had in that place was low sugar, high electrolytes, great taste. That was by far the copy that had performed the best on our homepage, and we were never able to beat it. And now we've actively chosen to lead with sort of the brand expression that we uncovered through the qualitative research, with our customers. And even like scrolling down, you can see that we've incorporated a lot more UGC than we had before, actually showing the product in use. We have more video content here. Really focused on the problems that we're solving, with postpartum dehydration. And
this hero product view, I think probably not enough brands do, invest. Like, how did you execute on this video?
This is literally from Shutterstock. It was just a video of a water balloon bursting. Because again, we can even talk about this just like going higher in the funnel. I think like it's really about the first 3 to 5 seconds and like hooking your audience in with creative that would only appeal to them. And what we have found out, through our own internal research as well as through the research we did, with our branding agency and talking to customers is postpartum dehydration is a massive problem that moms don't even realize they have. So with that video you saw on our homepage where it talks about, hey, the average breastfeeding mom loses up to a quarter of water a day, like while nursing, I was thinking, how can we visually show that? And showing this water balloon bursting was a quick way to sort of tell that story visually.
So yeah, simply you guys just put it together internally, get it up there.
Yeah.
More social proof. This is interesting, the move away from mothers that can lessen hangovers. Like, who doesn't want to reach for a beverage like this when they are hungover?
Totally. I feel like the GIF probably isn't playing, so that's something I need to figure out. But this is something that should be a GIF that not only cycles through our flavors, but also has a different value prop outside of breastfeeding per each flavor. So it could be crushes dehydration, it lessens hangovers, it has like less sugar, etc. So that way we're communicating the longer term value of the drink beyond the short term, which is definitely something that helps with lifetime value.
Then into sort of some more social proof for people listening on audio. We are on YouTube. We are actually screen sharing, which we're going to start doing a little bit more. What else would you draw attention to our listeners and viewers on this landing page?
So one thing you'll probably notice there is we do actually drive traffic directly to Amazon. In fact, that has been our hero product on the website, technically, in terms of placement, not only on the homepage, but also on our all products collection page for almost a year. And we've actually found that essentially our Shopify store has become the retention hub of the product in the brand, and Amazon has become where we acquire customers. So Shopify has sort of been a landing page where people do all their research and then they just convert on Amazon. And it's where people come back to do their subscriptions and to place bulk orders. And we spent months sort of doing tons of testing on that entire funnel and actually found that it not only helped us lower acquisition cost by double digits, but increased the retention. Because again, we're sort of using the Shopify store really as that brand hub. And from a profitability standpoint, as you can imagine, with the product is heavy, it just makes sense taking advantage of the Amazon efficiencies, as well as their shorter time between orders because of their shipping, like their prime shipping.
How do you think about trying to bring those Amazon users into the website, or because they give you nothing in terms of that? Do you think of that as like a retargeting effort, like almost like with your ads, you're then retargeting Amazon buyers?
Yeah, definitely. So there's retargeting. We don't really drive traffic directly to Amazon from Facebook, so we still capture a lot of email addresses and SMS through our pop-ups. And then also there's QR codes on the sides of all of our cartons. So if you order Greater Than, you'll see on the side a QR code that can help funnel people back to the website that way. That actually does get quite a bit of engagement.
Interesting. You got the nice the founder story, which is great, and looks great. Like so the brand has gone well. Have initial sales signals looked good?
Yeah, we definitely have seen a lift in conversion rate on the website itself. On Amazon, it's still been just like still swapping out some of the old cartons and some of the old inventory. So it's still sort of in that transition phase where you can get some of the old cartons, you can get some of the new. I'd say like the biggest challenge, at least from a marketing standpoint, is the lag of getting all of our creative swapped. Like our top of funnel ads, that we get from influencers still have the old cartons because it still takes so long just to sort of cycle through all of that. So I would say for any people who are listening who are going through a rebrand, really trying to get ahead of sort of that creative pipeline and getting your ads with the new cartons, your new packaging or whatever it is as early as possible so you can start to do that testing is critical. That way you aren't going to have sort of this brand mismatch where people are seeing your old packaging top of funnel and they go to your site or Amazon or wherever you sell and you're like, wait, is this Greater Than? Is this that chocolate brand that I saw on TikTok? Like, it just creates less confusion.
It's an inventory challenge, I imagine, as well, where you've just got to make sure you're sold out of the previous SKUs before you're, advertising the new ones.
Totally.
And so one note you have here, and I think this is going to be a reoccurring theme with guests going forward, but creative tasks and AI. I just, someone in our company did a big learning video on generative fill, and we're writing about it in our newsletter for Photoshop. So I'm curious, you have a note here that you've sort of in this rebrand lowered the creative costs by around 40%, which is super impressive. Talk about how you used AI during this rebrand.
Yeah, totally. It's worth pointing out that it changes so much. Like a lot of the apps that I used then have already been integrated directly into Canva to like basically like allow you to, just like highlight something and then you change like what that is, or to easily change colors or remove backgrounds. And essentially with this rebrand, we had tens of thousands of prior assets with the old branding that, I didn't really have the budget to sort of redo or reshoot. So we were able to basically just have one photo shoot where we got all the photos, the ones that you see on the website now. And I was able to use a lot of the apps that are now in Canva to edit old photos to match the new branding. And since our whole color palette changed, since, we're using like different sort of fruits and glasses and like different ways of sort of moving things around, I was able to pretty seamlessly, on my own, without any real Photoshop, outsourcing, pretty much make all the assets that you see on the website, which definitely helped to not only cut down the timeline that it took to get the new website live, but again, it was able to cut the Photoshop and the external editing budget down to almost $0.
And how are you using, which AI, you're using, the AI tools on Photoshop?
For example, the ones that are in Canva now, allows you to, for example, remove the background of specific images. You can easily, add filters. You can change colors of things. So, for example, if we had an old version of our brand that had, an aqua blue, in one place, and now we're using a sky blue, it was much easier for me to just make that change with one click versus before where I would have to do a whole creative brief and send over all of the assets to an outside creative and have them use Photoshop to move the fruits around or to add the water drops to these peaches or whatever it is. And I was able to do all that myself using a lot of the AI tools that are now already integrated directly in Canva.
Very cool. We talked already about how you're using Amazon and Shopify together in the buying funnel. But what else are you doing to drive more bottom line profit from your customers?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's definitely a huge focus on retention, across the entire industry, and not just for the Greater Than, but some of the other brands in my network. I think really sort of focusing on building that customer relationship is critical. One of the things that I just talked about on LinkedIn was about really doing things that aren't scalable and doing those at scale if possible. And for example, in this whole rebrand process, we were able to talk to a bunch of customers on the phone, able to do a lot of focus groups, able to really make them feel like they were a part of this new iteration of Greater Than. And one of the things that we found that led to was just more loyalty from these people. And something else that is also, been working not just for Greater Than, but again for some of the other brands that I talk to on a regular basis, is really leaning heavily into verified UGC. Then what I say by that, and it's just something I alluded to on the last podcast, is I think that there's just going to be more skepticism going forward, especially as AI content starts to flood the newsfeed of what people are seeing. We're already seeing it happen now in certain sectors where people are like, okay, is this real? Is this an ad? And I think that we're going to start to see sort of this reversion back to old school marketing where word of mouth is really important, and where the only people that you're going to be able to trust with product recommendations, if they aren't people that are people that seem like you. So I think that brands who focus on acquiring as raw and real of UGC as possible are the ones that are most poised to sort of weather this credibility storm that I think is really coming soon.
Across all aspects of society, potentially. Yeah, I think you're right about that. I can see it's already. I got my first video this morning. It was from some random TikTok handle that had political figures saying some wild things, but not wild, not enough that I totally know it's parody. And I was just like, okay, this is the beginning of a really interesting time. This episode is brought to you by Live Recover, an incredibly effective Shopify app that gives you access to an expert team of live agents who work on behalf of your brand to recover abandoned checkouts in real time. Live Recover is able to reach 6 times more potential customers than email or SMS automations because they have actual humans sending personally crafted messages to anyone who leaves their phone number at checkout. Live Recover doesn't conflict with your email and SMS tools like Klaviyo or Voyage SMS and can lift your top-line revenue by over 10%. Check them out and get a 30-day no-risk trial when you sign up at liverecover.com/DTC. What else? How are you, because I know you had plans on sort of really training up your customers as influencers and really helping them extend their reach. How has that endeavor gone, where you're actively trying to sort of improve your influencers' abilities?
Yeah, totally. I can't share tons of details, especially anything confidential, but what I'll say more broadly is that it's gone well in terms of getting the volume of content that we needed. One thing that didn't work as well is training people from 0 to 100. If you're someone who's never posted on Instagram before, who has no sort of real background in being an influencer, it's just extremely difficult to sort of train those people to deliver the exact content as needed. So what we eventually sort of had to adapt the program to be, and this is similar to some of the other brands who are doing similar things like Tab Chocolate and some of the other ones who have their own sort of army of micro influencers, is taking people that already have a little bit of a following and already a little bit of experience and training those people up and elevating them. And what we found was, again, it not only got us the army of content that we needed, but also the organic reach, through their networks that they've built that won't really show up on our UTM tags, but does sort of help increase the top of funnel brand awareness that eventually converts. And from a lifetime value standpoint, just to go back to your initial question, I've definitely seen UGC work incredibly well from an LTV standpoint when if you compare those UTMs directly to non-UGC UTMs. not just for Greater Than, but also for like other brands in my network. So I would say if there's one thing to really focus on, I know UGC has been sort of the talk of the town for a while, it's getting UGC that feels as real and raw as possible versus just paying some influencer who has a whole account just full of ads holding up, like whatever product is paying them. I think that sort of model is quickly coming to an end.
And cheap, thoughtless UGC, right? Where where you're not hitting. Where it comes across as inauthentic, ultimately, right?
Totally.
I think that's where it's falling down for sure. I was curious, as someone who consults also on product market fit, you've consulted with a bunch of different e-commerce brands. What does what are you really like? What's your main specialty? Would you say when you go into these organizations? Like, what are the first things first of all that you're brought in to consult on, and that you're usually focusing in on for brands?
Yeah, it's really the data piece, and I think everything starts with the numbers that already exist. I think that regardless of the product, and again, this is all products that are post-launch. I would say if it's pre-launch, that's totally different. But for post-launch, it's really just looking at everything. GA, looking at Shopify, looking at wherever there's unusual things that seem kind of odd. Like, this is getting weird clicks. It seems like we're over-indexing here. Like, what's that about? And I would say sort of just leaning into those things or doing the detective work for the unusual aspects of brands, in my opinion and experience, is really where we've found the best nuggets of opportunity. Not just with the whole breast milk thing for Greater Than, but also for plenty of brands that I've advised in the past. For confidentiality reasons, I can't share specifics, but I would say overall, really looking at the data objectively and finding unusual things that seem like they don't make sense and double clicking on those. That's really where I think the treasure map is for brands.
Interesting. And so we teased AI earlier, and it's definitely something on the podcast end that we're using quite a bit in the content game when it comes to summarizing. I would say when I use AI to summarize a podcast, to write an intro for me, for instance, or sometimes to analyze the pre-interview, I would say I end up using about 20% of it right now. And it's definitely not something that I would ever publish straight to air. But I'm curious, how are you using AI? What do you think people are getting right? What do you think people are getting wrong about how they're using AI in their e-commerce biz?
Totally. I mean, I would say, at least right now, just using ChatGPT and stuff for the past 6 months, I would put it at the level of an intern, or maybe 2 or 3 interns, from college. Extremely good at getting a lot of research and sort of a rough draft of stuff. It definitely has to be triple checked because I'm sure we've all seen the news articles of how it hallucinates or whatever they call it, and how it just makes stuff up, which I think is extremely dangerous. So I haven't used a single unedited piece of writing from any of these tools really ever, where I'm just publishing it as is. To your point, it's sort of hey, this is a good rough draft. Here's a good brainstorming partner. I think that with the right prompts, you can get it maybe to 40% of the way there. But I would say that's sort of the max that I've seen at this point. And I've heard comparable things from other peers of mine.
And then one of the main points of the last time we chatted was, the incendiary statement about iOS 14, where it just basically means that brands need to have a good product market fit. They need to have good processes. They need to have good marketing. They need to go back. They can't just rely on Facebook technically. And I'm curious, and AI is going to play into that as well, right? Because it's going to be 2 things. One, the brands that use AI are going to get way more efficient to the point you're going to have 3-person marketing teams for huge corporations. And there's also going to be a race to the bottom in the drop shipping world, right? You see it all the time about people just spinning up brands and that's always been a drop shipping move, right? Spin up a product, see if people like it, and cancel the first few orders and then go build it or whatever, source it. And I can imagine that aspect is only going to accelerate as well. So the cheap end of e-commerce could have a boom during this as well.
Totally. And again, I feel like what you just said ties back to what we just said with the UGC. Just like we saw with drop shipping 5 years ago. I think there's going to be this massive influx of sort of, these AI brands that just use Midjourney for all their content and, the exact same ad funnels and all of that. And it's just not only going to lead to this massive crowding and fatigue on our news feeds, but it's also just going to lead to a lot of customers being like, I don't want that. I think we're going into an era where brand and quality and sort of the human touch is going to have a massive premium. And I think customers are going to, sure, like having like your own AI avatar sounds cool or whatever it is, but I don't think that e-commerce, at least in the next era, is going to really work that way. So I still think that, there is going to be a massive premium placed on true quality as well as just being able to execute marketing in a way that requires understanding of your customer base, understanding of your value props, how to communicate them, the creative expression, etc. And yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see the way the role that marketing plays in the next evolution of the space, because it's like, I think of Google as an example where they have to be careful with the way that they unveil AI, because AI gives you one answer, doesn't give you a page of answers that are all competing to be your answer. So how they build in and balance like total integrity with the customer and the AI chats that they're having with the ability to monetize them. And then in that world, like if AI is just doing everyone's product recommending, like what is the world of marketing in a way? I'm curious, like in your midterm and long-term prospects on marketing as a field.
Yeah, I think that word of mouth and in person is going to become critical. I mean, like again, like not just for marketing e-commerce, I think in general, like we've already started to see that shift like coming out of the pandemic where people just crave community. They crave sort of, that old school way. And I think that that's something that unfortunately the D2C industry really shifted too heavily away from. And I'm guilty of that myself over the past decade. And I think that going forward, being able to harness true word of mouth recommendations from your customer base is going to be critical. And the only way to get that is to earn it. Through delivering high quality product and experience and, a good, like entertaining yet informative, like marketing funnel. I don't think sort of, the way of looking at e-commerce is like, oh, this is like a SaaS company. Like I feel like the past decade is going to cut it for most consumer brands going forward.
Interesting. But ultimately, you think that investors should be bullish in the D2C space. Why is that?
I do. I think that, e-commerce, sure, it's going through a little bit of a bump right now over the past 6 months, but I still think that e-commerce isn't going anywhere. If you look at the retail penetration of e-commerce to overall retail, it's still in the low to mid 20s. I think it's still going to keep going up. I think that e-commerce as its own standalone channel, I think had too high of expectations on it, over the past decade. But I still think it is a critical part of any brand, to be honest, for numerous reasons. It's really where your best customers will live. It's where you can acquire the most zero-party data, or first-party data, which is going to be huge going forward. I think that it's where you can find product market fit in a way that you still can't do on a shelf only. And, for brands that are only on Amazon, Amazon owns all that data about your customer base and they own the relationship. So I would say that having e-commerce as part of your, portfolio of channels is going to be a really critical piece. And if I were, an investor, I definitely would still want to like put money in the space and like give it the nurturing it deserves.
What's your stance on apps as a distribution method for CPG products?
It's interesting. I've seen the case studies that have said, the average order value and the stickiness of people who use apps is crazy. But then on the other hand, I have sort of the PTSD of like, the app craze, like from 5 to 10 years ago where at the end of the day, most people only use 6 apps on their phone. So you are competing with, share of thumb with hundreds of other apps. And if there's only 6, like one of those apps will be Instagram or TikTok. One of those apps will be Spotify. One of those apps will be Gmail, etc. So I think that having an app makes total sense if it's cheap to maintain and develop, and if you have an extremely loyal customer base and a lot of new products dropping. But I would say that shouldn't be the very first thing a brand focuses on. It might be something that they add on after they're already in a really good place.
So what's next? Now that you've launched this Greater Than rebrand, all the ads are now swapped out, performing well. What's next for Greater Than, and what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely very excited to see where Greater Than goes going forward. I think I mentioned this before we started this episode, but this rebrand was actually my final project with Greater Than. As mentioned on the prior podcast, the company's been around for almost 15 years now. The past 5 years that I've been part of the company has been an incredible ride, with Mark and John and the rest of the team. But I am now moving on to other opportunities. In the short term, am focused on helping other brands in the e-commerce space and the consumer space find their product market fit and bring their customer acquisition costs down and scale. I can't share what I'm doing after that. That's something that is still under lock and key, but I will be announcing it on LinkedIn in the coming months.
Very cool. Is it something? You probably can't even say if it's relevant if you'd come back on the podcast and talk about what you're doing next.
I mean, it's in the e-commerce space for sure. I mean, that's where I've spent my entire career. But I can't say anything else beyond that.
Bullish on e-commerce, but mum's the word. Well, nice. Well, thank you for coming back on the DTC podcast, and thanks for the update on Greater Than. I'm super excited to see where you go next. And if you want to get in touch with Bryan, you probably want to add him on LinkedIn because you've stepped up your content game there recently. I saw your awesome slides that you created there.
Yeah, thank you. I've been posting every day. It was a little nerve-wracking at first to market, I guess, by myself versus products, but it's definitely been extremely fruitful, and I hope to add as much value and insight to the LinkedIn e-commerce community as possible.
Nice. Well, we will include the link to Bryan's LinkedIn on this post. Thanks again, man. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at directtoconsumer.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.